Rachel Madel from Talking with Tech.
And I'm Chris Bouguet from Talking with Tech.
We have a podcast dedicated to augmentative and alternative communication, all things related to helping kids with complex communication needs.
If you have a passion for helping people with language disabilities, this is the show for you. Each episode features an interview or a roundtable discussion on a topic related to augmentative communication and helping people with language disabilities.
And we're really passionate about giving practical strategies to clinicians working in the field who are working with children or adults, anything related to AAC.
So you can look us up on iTunes, or you can find us on Facebook. We got a group over there, or check out our website at bit.ly/TWT podcast.
Please join our community of professionals that are working to ensure that everyone can say whatever they want to say, however they want to say it.
Please listen carefully.
What is communication?
An essential behavior of life. We have the both blessing and responsibility of trying to foster another.
It's the strongest way for two people to convey information to each other.
Communication is a lifeline.
It's just connection with other people.
Connecting people in terms of ideas, thoughts, or needs.
Draws us out of ourselves, draws us into that relationship, builds up our families. Without it, we'd be lost.
Whatever it is that we do to express intent and achieve an impact.
Communication is the ability to express your needs, wants, frustrations, and desires to anyone that you feel needs to have that information.
Welcome to Speech Science, a proud member of the Exceptional Podcast Network. This is Michelle Wintering. This episode is a special episode, number 79. Unfortunately, due to travel and illness taking down 2 of our 3 hosts this week, we thought we would bring you one of our favorite interviews instead. 2 years ago, Ayesha Butt, a pioneer in the field of speech and language in Pakistan, sat down to talk about starting a master's program in her country, what help she needs, and the troubles she ran into. And while you're at it, make sure you check our website at speechsciencepodcast.com, which links directly to our network friends at XPN. And also check us out at patreon.com/speechsciencepodcast. Of course, text or call 614-681-1798 and email us too at speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to subscribe so you can hear our voice every week, subscribe at speechsciencepodcast.com. You're listening to Speech Science. Enjoy.
Do you have an idea for a product or book? Or are you ready to go beyond in-service presentations? Well, how do you get started? And what if you don't have any business experience at all? Well, I have some great news for you. I'm Mei-Ling Chan, and I'm getting the nitty-gritty stories from parents, teachers, therapists, advocates, and people with disabilities who have created successful businesses, and they're sharing their intimate stories with you. Listen to us on the Exceptional Leaders Podcast and fast-track creating and building and sharing your idea with the world so that you can help more people.
Hi there, and welcome back to Speech Science Podcast. My name is Lucas Stuber. I'm here with Ivan and Chandru and our guest, Ayesha from Pakistan. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm thrilled that you've decided to share your experiences, and I'm glad that we've gotten to know each other. You were kind enough to introduce me to a conference that you'd organized in Pakistan. Several months ago here, and unfortunately because of visa problems, I wasn't able to come. But I love what you were doing there. Obviously, my background is all in augmentative and alternative communication. But I would love to hear more about yourself. If you could introduce yourself, how you got into the field.
Yes, my name is Ayesha Butt. I head a department of speech and language pathology at Rifa University in Islamabad in Pakistan. I graduated from England in 2014 from the University of Reading. And since then, I've gone on to do a PhD as well that I've just completed. But my expertise sort of lie in pediatrics as well. And unfortunately, I don't have the liberty to be able to only work with pediatrics because in Pakistan, we don't have that many speech and language pathologists. So we work across the board from anything and everything. And, you can imagine how difficult that is because you're not really able to specialize in one area. Because you really do need to help others in other areas as well. So Rifa, the university that I work with, is a pioneer in setting up the first speech and language pathology course in Pakistan, and this was only in 2010. So it's a very, very, very recently that they've started the master's. Prior to the master's, there was a diploma that did exist, but the diploma was, again, it was started by people within Pakistan who got a few clinicians from abroad who trained them and then left. And for years and years, this diploma was being run by people who were just doing things the way that they wanted to do them. So prior to my sort of heading into speech pathology, I went and observed the people who were working there in the clinics. And there were just a few techniques that they had used, and those techniques were being applied on everybody. So things like, if they were doing sucking and blowing exercises, then the blowing and sucking exercises were being done with children with autism, with Down syndrome, with cleft palate, because that is what they had learned. So when I went to England, I had decided that I would return back to Pakistan, and I would definitely bring back what I have. And I was very fortunate that my husband was in Pakistan. We shifted back, and so I took this on from there. And from 2010 onwards, we've been running a master's program, which has 2 intakes per year. So every 6 months we have another semester. And I'm not going to say, I'll be very honest, we haven't really reached where we wanted to reach, and we're still probably struggling because of, obviously lack of resources, lack of proper people, trained people. Those issues exist. But the fact is, at least where we've reached somewhere from those blowing and sucking exercises to, something that is more meaningful and more evidence-based. So that's where my background is. It's from England back to Pakistan. And I do apologize. I have a very, very strong Pakistani accent. And I understand that, I may fumble a little as well while speaking to you, but I'll try and be as clear as possible.
You sound great, in my opinion, to be honest.
You sound great.
I have a very strong American accent, so,
Yeah. And I do this weird shifting thing where I can't decide what accent I want to be. So you'll probably see that.
And sometimes I have Spanish-influenced English. So.
And with regards to multicultural, like you were saying, so we have 5 provinces here, and each province has its own language. So you can imagine just within the country, there are 5 languages, and then further dialects within those languages that we need to deal with. So multicultural difficulties sort of exist here as much as, one would think, oh, well, it's one country and one language, but it's not actually one language. Within that one country, there are 5 to 6 different provinces, 5 provinces, with each one with their own language, and each language with its own several dialects. So we need to deal with quite a lot of things at quite a few levels. And, even with regards to assessment and therapy, what you guys might take as, how do I explain this? What might come to you naturally, like, you pick up a self or a kelf and you just administer the test. We don't have the luxury of doing that. We don't have tests. We've got no published tests in Urdu at all. And that makes assessment so difficult. But then again, it makes therapy difficult as well, because when you haven't got the right assessment, how do you then move on to the right therapy, or what areas to look at? So we're dealing a lot with sort of informal assessments, dynamic assessments, trying to make the most of whatever we can, and, using internationally based tests informally to get our own sort of language samples out. And that's quite a huge issue. But with regards to Lucas and the conference that we had, one of the biggest problems that we faced over the last 4 or 5 years since this course started is, even things like AAC. The teacher who was actually teaching AAC had never seen a Big Mac in her life. So she didn't know what a Big Mac was, but she was teaching what a Big Mac is. And, so she didn't know what a Dynavox was, apart from what you see in pictures and on YouTube. But that's like, teaching somebody how to drive a car without them actually being in a car ever. So our students know what a Big Mac is, but if you show them a Big Mac in real life, they will probably not be able to tell you that that's a Big Mac.
Do you have access to that equipment now?
We're better, yes, because last year we decided, we sat down, as I have a team of 5 clinicians with me who we trained, and then they went on to join the course. So last year we decided that each year will be our focus year for one particular disorder or one particular area that we want to target. So the last year, from sort of June till June this year, was AAC. The only thing that we've been able to acquire is GoTalk 4 and AAC, the Big Mac. So those are the only two things that we've got now with regards to AAC. But at least that's like we've reached somewhere. We at least have a Big Mac to look at.
I'm gonna arrange for a care package to go out there because that's a relative poverty of supplies. What about now in Pakistan? Is there sort of a ubiquity of touch devices, or is this sort of still emerging, like tablets and that sort of thing?
We have, yes, with regards to tablets, we've got lots of tablets and they're very, very cheap. And we get a lot of stuff from China as well. So Chinese products are a lot cheaper that we can get our hands on. With this AAC event that took place, one of our students who has 2 children with special needs, we'd been asking her for a long time to actually work towards AAC for her kids, and it just never hit her. But when this conference happened, when this seminar happened, she went ahead and she's now developing the first device, which is called Coco. That's sort of, I think, one of her kids' name or her name. And she's designing this, and it's coming out in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And it has a lot of obviously it's not perfect because it's being done by her, and she didn't have the support that she needed, but she's kind of reached out to people, and people have been very, very good. And I think she's reaching out to you as well. I've asked her to get in touch with you, and she's going to reach out to you, and she's putting this device together, which is going to be the first device. So we're now, like I said, we decided that we would do it year by year so that we can focus on one thing at one time. And so because AAC was our main thing, we did actually go into AAC, and our students are now, this year, they're designing apps and they're designing softwares, and she's coming up with this device, which is an Urdu-based device, which is also, a very good thing. But we were hoping that you would come to Pakistan this year, and then we could do something about a stronger device that we can have, a more sort of robust.
Yeah, I'm still very hopeful that can happen. But please, I would love to connect with her. And then this device that she's building, is this a high-tech system or?
It's a mid-tech system. She's taken on a tablet, and what she's done in that tablet is that you take pictures of whatever your child is, likes. So let's say it's got a grid of six pictures. And then you put in the pictures that the child wants. So let's say the child wants juice or biscuits, and you can just take pictures of whatever. And then the child points to whatever they want, and then it says the item for them. So they'll point to the biscuit if they want a biscuit, and it'll say biscuit for the child. So it's a very, very easy, very low level, something very basic that she's doing. It's quite a good effort. I think it's a good start. At least somebody started somewhere.
That's brilliant. And in Urdu or English or all the above?
It's because you record your voice on it, so it can be any language. So if it's a biscuit, and let's say it's a biscuit for you, or I don't know, like water. If the child wants water, then you can just record water on it, and we'll do pani, whatever the word is in our language. So the good thing is that it can be used across a lot of different cultures and a lot of languages, and which is a good thing. And even within Pakistan, we were thinking of sort of telling her to do a further study to look at using that device with various languages within the country as well, and doing a research on that. That's a brilliant idea, and that's
I don't want to tread over, but I guess to continue this theme. One thing you've already spoken to, and that you and I have spoken to in the past, is sort of a relative poverty of evidence, right, in practice. And you just brought that up in a variety of different ways. So it feels like you're sort of finding yourself personally in a role where a lot of that onus is falling on you to organize. Is that unfair to say?
Well, I've kind of taken it. It's very scary. It's very scary, but I think I've taken on that role because when I came back, it's part of the responsibility that I have. When I returned to Pakistan, I was the first foreign qualified speech and language pathologist in this entire region. So obviously, initially, people looked up to me, and it's scary because sometimes I don't have the answers. It's scary also because I don't know everything. So it's very scary because especially with students, they look up to you and they want answers, and you don't have those answers most of the time. So you have to go and search for them. And but with organizing things, I enjoy them. B, I kind of feel like that's my responsibility. If I'm in that position, then it's not fair for me to keep everything to myself and for me to just learn and keep it to myself. It's better for me to share it with others. I can't do everything, and other people need to sort of step in as well. But I've got a wonderful team, and I think that really helps. It really helps that all the other 4 professionals that I have with me are so dedicated that even if I at times sort of sit back and think, oh God, this is not going to happen, they're the ones who push me forward and say, no, we've reached here. Let's just a little bit to go to the line. Even with this AAC event that we had, it almost fell apart about a month before it was supposed to be executed because of several reasons, including financial. And we did think that we would just do a small, course or something and leave the big conference aside. But then my team sort of pushed me, and we went ahead, and it happened, and we had 1,100 people attending that event.
I was going to say, I've seen the photographs. It looks like it was hugely successful. It
was. I can't thank everybody else, and can't thank you as well. But I mean, thank you so much for helping us in this entire time. I think it helps when people. We wanted to do this event a year earlier, but we couldn't do it then because the people that were supposed to come backed out at the very last minute because of security reasons. And they didn't feel that it was secure enough. And I think one of the few challenges that we have, apart from obviously the financial challenges that we have, resource challenges that we have, are also to do with the fact that people think that Pakistan is a very scary place to come to, which is not the case at all. I mean, David Baines and E.A. Draffin came, and we had a brilliant time with them. And, they were very kind, and they went online and they explained to people how wonderful their trip was and how safe it was. And, this what they had imagined or envisaged Pakistan to be, it was nothing like that at all. It's completely different. And I'm sure Chandru will agree with that. I mean, people tend to think India, Pakistan, this region is like a really scary region. But in fact, once you reach India and Pakistan and all these places, you understand how lovely these countries are and how hospitable people are.
Yeah, I can't agree more with that. Yeah. You talked a little bit about how you see many of the assessments and things like that as Eurocentric. So I was wondering too, if you have any ideas of how to rectify that, or if you have any advice to maybe people who are listening to them who are making materials, in the Western world, and making assessments in the Western world. How would you suggest they make assessments to be culturally sensitive for many different regions in the world, because it is becoming an increasingly global profession?
First of all, I have no idea what Eurocentric means. So
or
you
like
lost me there.
It's like I think many of the therapy materials and things like that are very central to America and just
Western.
general European culture. I've
Well,
noticed
even
that
Western,
right.
yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Sort of language specific, even small things like the keof or the self in Britain is very different to the self in America. So where things like pretzels are quite common for the American people, there's no concept of a pretzel in Britain when I was studying. So even tests that are designed in English, when applied in another English-speaking population, they're not accurate. So I mean, it's as minute as that. So an American test applied on the American population is very different to the same test, even though Britishers also speak English. It's not the same. And I know that Chris Brebner also did a study on RAPT, and she went to Singapore and she did the RAPT in Singaporean English, and it came out with completely different results, and she had to do her own test. So I think it's like you were saying, the tests are probably designed more for the population that you live in, because they need to be linguistically and culturally sensitive to that particular environment or to that particular region or the country. And it's not always very easy to transfer them in that way. And I think people are becoming more and more aware, and they are doing things like, I've noticed with a lot of new books that are coming up, or a lot of therapy tools that are coming up, they are keeping the Muslim community in mind, and maybe not using shorts where they might in the past have used a person, a female wearing shorts or a bikini or, something different. They're no longer using that kind of clothing, because they understand that the population that they're going to be reaching out to within even the States may be not, sensitive. They may be sensitive to something like that, or using vocabulary that is, things like, it's a silly thing to say, but pig, just the word pig. Is it's something very cute in the American culture, and you've got a piggy bank, and it's Peppa Pig, and it's so cute. But in Pakistan or in the Muslim culture, sometimes they say, oh, don't actually say the word pig, because your tongue will not be clean for the next 60 days. So just using that word in itself is not considered appropriate. Sure. And I think people are becoming more aware, and as we're sort of coming together, I think people are being aware of that and they are being culturally sensitive. But I think it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult to say that, a test that you've developed in America can be used in Pakistan, and that I'm not sure if I'm explaining this as well as I need to. Maybe Lucas can help.
No, that's fantastic. Well, what it brings to mind for me is in the process of developing free speech, right, with my colleagues led by Ajit Narayanan in India, and even prior to my joining the team in the development of Avaz, which means voice in Hindi. One of the things that's been a real trend is trying to get, Arabic versions and all these other things. And we do have 17 languages that are represented now, so there's quite a bit. But one thing we didn't take into account is even little things like, like the photo, the symbol for greeting someone, for example, was a handshake. And we had to flip that around so that the correct hand for the culture was being used, right? Same thing with some representations of time and these other things that we just sort of take for granted. So that's very interesting. I mean, that's before you joined, we were sort of discussing, and I was thinking about the example of PECs and low-tech systems almost being the easiest to adapt, just because you have total control over the language and the order of the words and these other things. But yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. I remember, and the other thing that happens with assessments even here is that they age, right? So, there'll be articulation assessments, for example, where they show like a phone booth or an old rotary phone, and kids in the U.S. have no idea what that is.
Or language assessments too, which do the same thing, where they say, "Oh yeah, you're lost and you need to ask someone for directions." Apparently, all the kids will say, "Why don't you just Google Map it or ask Siri where to go?"
Right. Or I remember giving. I guess I won't name the assessment. I don't know if it's bad to say, but there's a certain famous aphasia assessment where one of the questions is, why does everybody in the army camp hate the bugler? And I'm paraphrasing. Wow. And the person I was assessing said, "What's a bugler?" And the answer is that that's the person that plays reveille in the morning to wake up all the soldiers. So it's like the alarm clock. Everybody hates the alarm clock. But this is, this was an 80-some-odd-year-old man, and he didn't know that. I didn't know that. These things, they change quickly, and also can change in terms of racial sensitivity. Like I collect old materials, for example, and I have a CH articulation book that talks about Charlie Ching Chong and his Chinese laundry. And it's just amazing. I want to frame some of these things and make a museum of horrors. Anyway, that was a long monologue. Go ahead.
Sorry, Lucas, I was just going to add, when you said PECs and low-tech devices, I of course, I agree with you. But one of the biggest issues that we have here is also the fact that people are very sensitive to using PECs because they think that will hinder their child's ability to speak. And the myths that follow with PECs and AAC still exist. We're trying to break those barriers. And one of the reasons that we had this conference was to explain to them that, look, if your child is 12 years old and he's not speaking, at least give him a chance to communicate. It's more about communication than it is about speaking. And people think that, oh, no, if we put our child on PECs or a device, that our child will never be able to speak because the speech therapist is not doing their work properly. Right. So that's another mindset that we have to deal with. At our end in Pakistan over here.
Well, and we get that here too, certainly, but we have more SLPs and, where you have evidence we can leverage, and I'm able to talk parents out of it.
I know Pakistan isn't a big homogenous block and everyone interacts the same, but I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the attitudes towards communication disorders and services in them. I have a bit of experience with that in India, where I've noticed that especially at the preschool level, much of services for speech and language tend on teaching pre-academic skills as opposed to more functional ones, which is how I feel early intervention in the United States works. I was wondering if you could also comment on what you think the attitudes are and how services look like a little bit.
Thank you, Chandru. That's such a valid point. That is such a valid point. Thank you so much. It's absolutely true. We used to face the same sort of issues here in Pakistan as well, that people would work more on, like you said, linguistic, more literacy skills and other things rather than actually language. And it's sort of broken. sort of broken that pattern now, but we're still struggling with it at some levels. And I think we're struggling more with people who did not join the masters. I'm not saying this because of the masters, but what I'm trying to say is that people who were actually doing the diploma and who had certain patterns, we had to actually break their patterns and teach them again and reteach them and explain to them that actually it's not about teaching ABC and it's about teaching functional communication. It's about teaching, speech skills and pre-linguistic skills, and those are the important parts. You're absolutely right. People still tend to focus more on that area rather than teaching language, but it's getting better. We are getting there, and we as we've taken it upon us. We ensure that we have regular trainings, especially in Rifa, and we try and make them as free as possible for people to attend. And these are the sort of things that we're working on. We're trying to explain to people, but it's I don't know if it's the same in India, but in Pakistan, one of the biggest problems is that there is actually lack of awareness even within the professional community. So things like, a pediatrician will, if a child goes to a pediatrician, the pediatrician will say, actually, wait till your child is about 5 years old. Once they're 4 or 5 years old, then take them to a speech therapist, because by then they'll start speaking. But the problem is by 5, when the child has actually not spoken or the child is not communicating in any way, and the parents bring them to us, a lot of time has actually passed where we could have given really good early intervention. And now the child has this, you have a 5-year-old with a communication disorder, or things like, people go to clinicians and say, my child's stammering. And there's a lot of evidence to say that LITCOM is a very good approach that can be used before 6 years of age and, that sort of thing. But because the clinicians have heard of LITCOM but don't know how to implement LITCOM, some of them will actually say, what you need to do is just go home, wait till your child comes out of it naturally. And if they don't come out of naturally, by 7 or 7.5, bring them back to us, because then they'll be able to follow things like prolonged speech and the instructions that we give. And then those parents come back when their child is 7 or 8. And by then we say, actually, sorry, but, LITCOM is only useful to 6 years of age. And now your child will have to live with the stammer that they have. I'm not saying that, that any child who comes for LITCOM comes out of their stammer, but I'm just saying that at least there is some evidence to say that if we had tried this, there was a possibility that the child may not have had that stammer. Even with adults, I've had so many cases where people have gone up to doctors and said, look, I have this problem, I'm not swallowing properly. And they will never refer the client to a clinician, either because they don't know that a speech and language therapist does swallowing, or the fact that they know, but they don't give them the respect as a profession. They don't feel that because you have not done an MBBS, you are not a doctor, that you're not at the same level and you're sort of beneath. Right. So, your question was more language based, and I've kind of taken it to another dimension completely. But it sort of took me to that, and that is unfortunately, that is an issue. Sorry.
Can you tell us more about the speech and language preparation programs at the university level in Pakistan?
The preparation levels.
Yes.
Like what do you have to do to become a speech therapist in Pakistan? For
the Masters in Speech and Language Pathology, it's a 2-year course, and it's about 65 credit hours that you need to complete. But prior to that, you must have either a psychology background or a linguistics background or some sort of a background. But what we've done is we've also incorporated some courses within the masters. So if you haven't done psychology previously, you do a semester of psychology as well. But there are no bridging courses. Like, when you come to the States, when I was going to the States, they said, well, you don't have a psychology or a linguistics background, so you need to do certain hours, credit hours.
Right.
Or when I went to Reading, they said, actually, you've done your master's, but you don't have exactly the same, like you don't have a bridging course in between. So I had to do a master's in linguistics and child language before I did speech and language pathology. But in Pakistan, there's no such thing. So when we first started its master's, they kept it open for anybody and everybody. So anyone can join. Anyone who's done 16 years of education can join. So anyone who's done their bachelor's can then join. And it doesn't really matter what subject you've had previously. However, they prefer subjects like psychology, linguistics, medicine, or any other allied health sort of related subjects. We've often spoken about having a bridge, but the problem is that as soon as our first batch of masters graduated. Some of the students went and started another master's program with another university. So because they started that master's, we can't now bring in this new thing about having a bridge prior to going into that master's. But what we've done is, in return, we've made those 2 years very stringent and very, very tough. And we're trying to incorporate as much as we can. So we're doing lots and lots of clinical practices, and we incorporate clinics within the courses that we're teaching, like clinical decision making. And we've also done we've kind of signed MOUs with different organizations, special needs centers, hospitals, and we take our students there and we try and get them to do as much placement as possible as well. And we've been very, very lucky. A lot of clinicians abroad have helped us, and they've said, look, we'll do online Skype sort of supervisions as well. And so Mariam Saida is in Dubai, and whenever she gets a chance, she helps us, and she does that. But you're right, there's nothing really prior to that, like a bridging course that a year's bridging course is something that you could do before you enter the masters. I would have loved for something like that to be in place.
Once they graduate for the master's level degree, is there a credentialing or a licensing that they must take in order to serve as speech-language pathologists in Pakistan?
Funny enough, Lucas and I were just speaking about this before the interview. This is exactly what we were talking about. When students from Rifa graduate, we have a competency score, a competency chart that they must fulfill, that we've developed through sort of looking at other competency requirements from across the world. So at Rifa, we can guarantee that we are doing this. We have a competency list, and we have a log that they must fill of a certain number of students before we actually give them their degree. A lot of other places are not doing that, actually. And as soon as you graduate, you're free to go and work. And that's all that's required, just that degree. In some cases, there are people working without that degree as well. They haven't qualified as yet, but because there's such a shortage of professionals, that they've been hired while they're still studying in their first year of masters. And we have to actually call those people up and tell them, look, don't do this, because these students don't have a background of speech pathology. They have just started, and it's, we would really recommend that you wait for another year before you hire them, so that they've at least had their clinical practice under supervision from us. So we're doing whatever we can to ensure that we give the best possible. But Lucas and I were speaking about exactly this before the interview started. We were talking about one of the biggest challenges that we have is that we do not have a regulatory body or a governing body like the Ayesha or the RCSLT. And both Lucas and I were discussing this, and we felt that just by having a regulatory body, a lot of things can be streamlined. A lot of things can be, brought to the quality that we want them to come to. Because if you have a body, then that body will try and create awareness. If there is a body, they will say, look, any course that is sending out students must fulfill these requirements. If there is a regulatory body, then you will be pushed to have CPD, continuing professional development. So if you're not doing that, and if you're not fulfilling the audit requirements, then you will be, your name will be stricken off. So I think when we talk about challenges, yes, all the other challenges exist. We have resource problems, we have financial problems, but one thing that we can be helped with, Lucas asked me, what is it that you need help with? So yes, we do need resources in terms of finances. We do need resources in terms of people. We're so happy with people even giving us, Skype. Like Lucas was very kind. He sent us a video, and the video we showed at the conference, and people learned a lot from that. So where we need all of these things, we definitely need a body, which is a government body, not a local body, because what has happened is a lot of clinicians who have passed have graduated, have then gone on, made an NGO, given it the name of Speech Pathology Pakistan, or Association of Speech Therapists or whatever. And what they're doing is, as soon as you join the association, you get a license to practice from them. And along with that license, you only pay another $20, which is 2,000 rupees, and you get triple Cs. So when we ask them what are these triple Cs, they don't actually know what the triple C stand for, but because the Ayesha has triple Cs, so you can pay $20 and get triple Cs. Now we've actually fought, because most of these people were sort of in some way associated with us, like they're trained under us. So I could fight with them at that level and get the triple Cs out and say, look, you will be legally liable in some form and don't do this. And we managed to fight the triple Cs out. They don't have the triple Cs now. But for the first year or so, they were actually granting triple Cs to anybody who was joining their association. So we have in Pakistan, with the Medical and Dental Council, we have the Pakistan Medical Dental Council that does all of this. They're the regulatory body. And I think one of the things that I was asking Lucas was to please, if possible, connect us to somebody who can help us set up something like this in Pakistan, because it's not something that one person can do. There are so many procedures that involve policies, paperwork. We've already got so much going on that it's probably not possible for one person to just take the responsibility of setting something like that up. But I think the next year, like last year was the AAC year, next year our target is to actually get one of these regulatory bodies out and speak to the government and say, actually, somebody has to take notice of this, and somebody has to be responsible for establishing something like this.
Welcome back, and thanks for listening to Speech Science. This is Michelle Wintering again, and be sure to come tune back in because we will have some interviews coming up for you with the Ayesha president, a multilingual SLP who knows 4 different languages, and hopefully an interview with someone from the American Hippotherapy Association, since I just wrapped up some continuing education myself with their Level 1 Part 1 training. Our intro music, Please Listen Carefully by Jazar, is licensed under an Attribution Share-alike license. Bump music, County Fair Rock, copyright of John Deku at soundcloud.com/dirtdogmusic. Closing music, The Slow Burn by Kevin MacLeod is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution license. Be sure to rate and review us on iTunes, Speech Science, and hit that subscribe button. Thanks.
This has been an Exceptional Podcast Network production. Speech Science is edited and produced by MWH Production. Please follow Speech Science on Twitter at SpeechSciencePC and like our page on Facebook. For more original podcasts, please visit exceptionaled.com and rate and subscribe to our podcast anywhere you get your podcasts.